Hello, I am Blake Thornton, and welcome to my presentation on Stela tres Zapotes. Mesoamerica, an area now encompassed by the countries of Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Belize, shown here, was and continues to be home to some of the most complex indigenous societies in the New World. Today, we will discuss how the ideas and concepts of the Olmec culture and the lesser-known Epi-Olmec culture shaped the concepts behind the design of classic Maya monuments, specifically the royal monuments known as portrait stela. Based on my research, I believe we can trace some of the concepts used in classic Maya stela through the Epi-Olmec culture and into the Olmec culture. Portrait stela are large stone monuments shaped into the image of a ruler and are accompanied by a portion of their story or life in hieroglyphic text. Additionally, they were viewed as objects of agency and power. As stated by Sarah Jackson, in the modern Western contexts, we frequently frame the abilities of objects in terms of their function. From a Maya perspective, however, objects can act in relational capacities that we may be more accustomed to attributing to people. End quote. For example, the carving of the ruler's name into the stela and the ruler taking part in some form of action, such as the ruler participating in the Mesoamerican ballgame. Relating the stela back to humankind and all else that exists, whether it's plants, animals, deities, inanimate objects, and much more. As is with the death of a member of society, objects imbued with a soul can, in a sense, die through breakage or defacement. I believe these concepts of Maya monuments can be traced back to the Olmec through an understanding of the Epi-Olmec. The Olmec, circa before Common Era 1200 to 400, are in a way the founders of Mesoamerican culture. Seen here on your screen is a map of the Olmec region. We will be discussing the sites of La Venta, San Lorenzo, and Tres Zapotes. Much of what the Olmec believed, practiced, and invented is seen in almost every culture in Mesoamerica. Take the Mesoamerican ball game, for example, a game that eventually became part of the Maya faith and contributed to the Aztecs referring to the Olmec as the rubber people, as a result of the rubber ball that was used in the game. At La Venta Complex A monument was discovered, specifically Monument 6. This monument is better known as a sarcophagus, and was found buried within the complex, resting on a floor of serpentine tiles. Shown here is the monument as it was being excavated from the original site, and shown here is an illustrator's drawing to better represent the detail that we're missing in this photo. The overall iconographic program that was conveyed by the objects in this funerary monument was intended to associate the buried ruler with the act of cosmic creation and thus with world renewal and agricultural regeneration. The placement of the ruler within the sarcophagus symbolizes the belief that the ruler would be reborn into the maize deity in death. Similarly, though not related to death, but rather agricultural renewal, at the site of Chalcatzingo, on the rock wall of the cliff, is an Olmec carving of a ruler in a cave with his hair representing maize, seen in both photos. This is the ruler inside the cave. This carving is known as El Rey. On the outside of the cave, as the clouds rain, maize begins to grow, shown here, furthering the ruler's connection with the maize deity and agricultural renewal. Lastly, there is the Olmec were-jaguar, a staple of Olmec artwork. The were-jaguar is a depiction of a figure that is half man, half jaguar, or some combination of the two. Nearly any artwork showing a downturned mouth, shown here, or a cleft head, has been described as being a were-jaguar. In some circles, it is thought that the were-jaguar is one of several Olmec deities, most likely representing the rain deity. These ideas, art styles, and concepts did not end with the fall of the Olmec, but rather were transformed at the site of the epi-Olmec city of Tres Zapotes. The epi-Olmec culture started shortly after the fall of the Olmec, around before Common Era 400. During this collapse, the smaller Olmec villages, like Tres Zapotes, began to see a major population boom, as is evidenced in the archaeological record, shown here. This dark gray area represents the original habitation of Tres Zapotes, and this lighter gray area represents the expanded habitation after the fall of the Olmec cities. In terms of archaeological, epigraphical, and iconographic study, the epi-Olmec have seen significantly less attention than the Olmec and Maya. Rather than representing a simple dark age between the two major cultures, the epi-Olmec represents a crucial Renaissance period, during which time major advancements were being made. Here can be seen the front face of Stela C, only half of it as the monument is broken. But to show you the full thing, here is the full front face of Stela C as an illustrator's two-dimensional drawing. Working ourselves from the top to the bottom of the monument, we see a kingly figure here surrounded by maize husks on both sides of him. Above the ruler is an image of the sun and sky. Wrapped around this figure is a quadripartite buckle or badge. In both the Maya and Olmec cases, the quadripartite badge is associated with the maize deity and the powers that rulers hold in relation to that deity. At the foot of the figure, here, is what many have interpreted as the world tree, or axis mundi, from which traditional Olmec rulers hailed their power to rule. I would now like to draw your attention to the thin dotted line marking the separation of the stela, now being highlighted in red. Christopher Poole states that subsequent to its carving, Stela C had been broken into at least 3 pieces, with one break severing the personified world tree from its roots. Maybe it marked a rejection of the cosmological charter for the office of rulership. End quote. Moving our focus to the face that the axis mundi is sprouting from, here, we can see what has often been interpreted as an Olmec were-jaguar. However, it is my belief that this face is an epi-Olmec translation of the Olmec terrestrial dragon or crocodile we saw earlier when we were discussing Monument 6 from Leventa. Now, I would like to guide your viewing of the stela as a whole. Imagine, if you will, that the face on the bottom is the front of the sarcophagus we discussed earlier. Within it is the king figure shown above, being transformed into the maize deity, which is represented by the maize husks around him. My research has led me to believe that this is a depiction of the laying to rest of the fallen or deceased rulers of the old Olmec culture in a traditional Olmec manner, followed by the severing of their connection and future connections to the powers associated with the world tree and divine rebirth. I won't be getting into great detail on this now, but I would like to introduce the back of epi-Olmec Stela C to you before we progress to the Maya. Sterling's research into the pieces of Stela C, most notably the back, shown here in this image from Sterling's 1939 excavation of Tres Zapotes, noted that the obverse was more weathered than the reverse, a condition we attribute to the reverse having been recarved at a later date, removing the weathering patina. End quote. What would be the reason for recarving this monument? As Poole suggests, it was recarved in 32 BC to commemorate an event using the epi-Olmec invention of the long count, to place that date in historical time. Is it possible that the event being discussed by Poole could have been a celebration of both the invention of the long count, as well as to celebrate the success of Tres Zapotes and its new council of leaders? If epi-Olmec Stela C was carved in 32 before Common Era, before the known creation and use of the long count, by the classic Maya, how does that affect our understanding of Maya invention and thought? The Maya, before Common Era 1000 to present, are one of the longest-running cultures from Mesoamerica, having started during the rise of the Olmec and continuing into the present day. Prior to the conquest and presently, the Maya region covers what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, shown here on your screen, into parts of El Salvador and Honduras. However, it was not a wholly unified nation, but rather a collection of city-states that shared a common culture. Returning our attention to the back of Epi-Olmec Stela C, also shown in 2D form, the bar and dot numerals shown are easily recognizable to those familiar with the Mayan numeral system. And those familiar with it will know that the long count is thought to be a Maya invention. However, with this stela, it is possible to say that these numerals and the long count were first developed here at Tres Zapotes. When read using the Maya system, with the help of the Mayan Dresden Codex shown on your screen, it reads 7, 16, 6, 16, 18. In our calendar, that would be September the 3rd of 32 before Common Era, which would make Stela C older than any previously deciphered Maya stela. Additionally, the script that remains has a clear Olmec connection with the were-jaguars of the earlier Olmec style, as well as the image of a jaguar, shown here, which appears in most Mesoamerican cultures. However, in this case, it is opening the date sequence. As Justison and Kaufman noted upon a partial decipherment of Epi-Olmec writing, using a stela found at Epi-Olmec La Mojara, Epi-Olmec writing was more closely related to Mayan than to other Mesoamerican scripts, that its numeral and calendrical systems were much the same as Mayan, and that its text preserved the columnar format that was modified in the Mayan Izapan area to a more complex system of paired columns. As evidenced by Epi-Olmec Stela C, the use of the Mesoamerican long count hints at this exchange of ideas and concepts between the Epi-Olmec and the early Maya, foreshadowing the long count's later use by the Classic and Late Classic Maya. As you might remember from earlier, the Classic and Late Classic Maya rulers took part in the erecting of stela in the royal human form to remind people of their power, their accomplishments, and to serve as an immortal body in their afterlife. Though not a stela, Lord Pakal's sarcophagus lid, shown here on your screen, is a wonderful late classic Maya representation of this. In the center of the lid, we see Lord Pakal, here, dressed to resemble the maize deity, being offered, here, into the open maw of the underworld, represented here. Sprouting from Pakal is the world tree, here, connecting the heavens, the underworld, and the middle planes, including Pakal, to Pakal and his sarcophagus lid. This connection allowed Pakal to continue to be tethered to his sarcophagus lid after death, acting as his immortal body, and is also showing his transformation into the maize deity through his resembling of the deity itself. If for a moment we take a look back at Epi-Olmec Stela C, we can begin to see the same concept being portrayed, with the ruler dressed to resemble maize, sitting atop the world tree that connects the heavens and the middle planes to the Olmec terrestrial dragon or crocodile, who floats on top of the green waters of the underworld. However, during the rebirth of the ruler into the maize deity, his connection to the world tree is broken. In summary, you can see my research on Epi-Olmec Stela C demonstrates how we can trace the concepts used in classic Maya stela through the Epi-Olmec and Olmec cultures. We have seen similarities with how these cultures portrayed a king's link to the world tree and how he is transformed into the maize deity in death. Additionally, there were commonalities with depictions of were-jaguars in Epi-Olmec writing and a pre-Maya use of the long count by the Epi-Olmec. This exchange and blending of ideas between these three cultures has helped influence the design of classic and late classic Maya portrait stela, as well as Lord Pakal's sarcophagus lid. Thank you.